Hi, and welcome to Designing for Conversions. What we'll talk about today is what we call designing for conversions. And the things I'm going to talk about include all kinds of elements from cognitive psychology, as well as best practices that are learned from many tests that have been run both at our agency and in the industry around us. Now, I'll first of all tell you, I do not have a degree in cognitive psychology. While I do have some in computer and electrical engineering and an MBA, psychology is not one that I have pursued. But I have been fortunate enough to read lots and lots of papers, lots of academic studies, and work with many of the best people out there to find out how people navigate websites, what people tend to do to drive conversion actions. So again, the other thing I'd like to preface with this is that these things that we'll talk about during these videos are not recipes for guaranteed success. Instead, what they are leveraging best practices, leveraging aspects of human behavior so that if you are going to offer testing to your clients, or if you are going to take a decision on one of these particular elements in web design or landing page design, you're setting yourself up for the best possible chance of conversion. Now, we won't know if this is a conversion test that will give you a positive lift in conversion rate until you've actually run those tests, but these are some things that will fill your notebook with hopefully some things that are good ideas to test. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And we want to get started with some of these elements of psychology, and specifically what drives people to make decisions. And there's been a lot of research out there by some very talented and very intellectual people who have figured out a lot about what makes our brains work. And what we've found is that although human beings like to think of ourselves as extremely evolved creatures, that depending on every decision that we make, we think about every possible outcome and every possible alternative, and then we analyze the pros and the cons and we choose the best course of action. That's actually not so much the case. Most of our decision making is actually coming from a very simple part of our brain, and we're not using all of these complex areas. We're actually using this part called the primal brain, or it has lots of different names. You may hear it called the reptilian brain, but this is one that's formed very early in our development, and it is the sort of thing that is responsible for that fight or flight, and the decisions that we make here are very instinctive and impulsive. A great example or a great proof point on this is the idea of a candy bar. If we were these evolved human beings, we would probably never purchase a candy bar. If we were looking at that on the shelf and we went through all the logical thought process and said, well, I can read the label and I see that there's nothing in here that's good for me, and I know that it's going to slow down my metabolism and make me unhealthy and terrible things will happen to me, we would make the decision to put that back and not eat it. But what actually happens is we look at it and this decision-making part of our brain lights up and says, I want that, and we go and buy it. And then we use all the other parts of our brain to rationalize that decision and say, well, I ate that candy bar, but I'll just have a salad later tonight, or I'll exercise extra tomorrow, and that'll be the reason that I'm able to have this candy bar now. And it's a really interesting part of human psychology. Now, why are we talking about all of this when we talk about designing for conversions? Because we can use this to help design the right kinds of pages and the right kinds of user experience to help usher and guide our customers through the conversion flow process that we have. Now, a couple of things we want to talk about first of all. This decision-making part of the brain is specific to a number of different elements, and we can certainly talk about many more, but what for this particular video we want to focus on are just a couple. First of all, this particular part of the brain is very sensitive to contrast, and we'll go into each of these in a little more detail in the further videos that follow. The next one here we have is tangibility. Something that is very tangible is very easy for this part of the brain to recognize and make a decision to either go or not go, for example. This all part of the brain is also very in tune with emotional responses. And again, we're not talking about complex emotions here. We're talking about the sort of emotion that is very simplistic. The last one that we want to talk about here is visual. This is one of our earliest senses, and it's one that we use as human beings and have evolved to find our food and hunt our food and continue to evolve as a species.